Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the holiday-themed monster booklet, 10 Hazards of Love, designed by Lucas Anderson, Lee, Daniel, King, Jack, Weighill, Jonathan, Swadley, Sharkside, Aaryan, Balu, and Sebastian for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you're interested in a sponsored review, please reach out to me via email, Twitter, or Discord, or on my submission form at roguewatson.com. And if you enjoy the content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. This is now the third of the holiday-themed monster supplements that I have reviewed, after the Christmas one and the summer one. This is obviously a Valentine's or Happy Love Day for Simpsons fans. And I think this is another good choice. There's a lot of fun tropes and concepts you can pull to make fun love-themed monsters. You obviously have to be very careful, and I'm very glad that the very opening page mentions the fact that, hey, charm does not mean mind control. A lot of monsters have the charm effects, which can mean different things depending on what that monster can do, but it lays it out right here and says, look, this is what it says in the rulebook, which charm just means you cannot target the person who charmed you with hostile effects, and you've got advantage to interact with them socially. That's what it means. It does not mean you get to mind control that person. Now, that is a spell in D&D, and that's a whole other conversation. But that's an important note to make, because that's something that obviously could come up with a lot of love-themed monsters, and I was very worried, although I shouldn't have been based on the previous material that I reviewed, that we would fall into that trap of having, succubus type creatures. In other words, love was going to be personified as purely seductive, and thankfully this does not do that. In fact, I don't believe any of these creatures involve that particular form of love, which is really, if you think about it, a very bad, manipulation version. Can be very nasty. Instead, we get kind of fun, a continuation of some of the jokey ones, like the chocolate golem is a really fun idea. The wine elemental, a literal beating heart, is a cool giant creature with layer actions and regional effects and everything. And then we've got some others that are kind of a lot of celestial type creatures. Like there's Freya, which is just the Norse goddess of love, and then the Sovereign, which is kind of this booklet's take on what I think is Cupid, which is just a celestial creature that fires arrows. Although in this case it's not a little cherubic baby, it's just a babe dude basically who goes around shooting arrows that have different effects. I think there's overall an over-reliance on celestial and fey creatures that didn't necessarily interest me very much. The ones that I found more enjoyable were the ones that had more fun with the kind of sappy, Valentine's Day version of love, which is the chocolate golem, made out of a box of chocolates, and the wine elemental. I think those are fun ideas, and I would have liked to see a few more of those. But overall, I think I like about maybe half of the stat blocks, which is probably a decent ratio, though when you only have 10, that means there's half that I don't like as much. The beating heart is a very neat idea, and a lot of these, half of them I believe, have legendary actions, and they're not all CR 15 and above. I'm a big fan of seeing legendary actions on smaller creatures, because if you have a creature that's designed to be based by itself, it's going to get its ass kicked unless it's significantly stronger than the heroes, unless you give it legendary actions, because that's how you beat the action economy. So I really appreciate seeing this. This one's CR 14, so it's still pretty big. But later on, we're going to see there's some lower level creatures that still have legendary actions, which I think is really, really cool. In the case of the Beating Heart, not only does it have legendary actions, also layer effects and regional effects. So it's meant to be this big, corrupting element. And then, it's got adventure hooks, which is something these holiday books all do. Is for all of its creatures, you can find adventure hooks that give you ideas on how to use this creature, including having an entire village that's just, everything is in disrepair, and they're all revelry and passion. And I like here in the case that the Beating Heart, it's not about necessarily love, it's about just passion. It could inspire bloodlust, it could inspire jealousy, just whatever raw emotions. They don't necessarily have to do with love. but would be, you know, purely that element of people versus any kind of logic element. And there's a really fun adventure hook where a illithid elder brain is trying to combine with the beating heart, because that's kind of the same concept here. We have this big, you know, organ thing that's kind of in control of an area. It's got a cool stat block where it can basically just beat its heart, and that has all these different effects that it requires saving throws and can either charm or frighten. And it mentions the fact that if a creature is both charmed and frightened, then they are stunned, which makes sense. It can use its legendary actions to heal people around it, which anybody that's charmed by it is included as an ally. Layer actions include in summoning blood elementals. You can use the water elemental stat block, as well as hearing. Of course, it's the sound of the hideous heart, you know, pounding in your head, or all these veins appearing, or just having your emotions heightened. Just a really cool idea for kind of a twist on the Elder Brain. The Celestial Magpie. I don't know what birds have to do with love. I guess the magpie is supposed to be a bird of love. Maybe I'm not up on my love tropes, but in this case, it can cast Plane Shift, and it's a celestial. It can come in a swarm, which is kind of interesting, and I guess it could technically do the mimic thing, but otherwise not terribly interesting. Chocolate Golem is fantastic, and similar to the Golem in the barbecue Golem in the Midsummer product I reviewed. It's just a funny idea to take, you know, a literal like item that we associate with this season and turn it into a monstrous golem. I love the idea that if it's subjected to a certain amount of fire damage, then parts of it melt and it is actually reduced. Kind of similar to the way I believe it's the ochre jellies, that they kind of split. Although in this case it doesn't split; it just reduces down to the next size. We do get three sizes. Sorry, the small, medium, and large. And when it's reduced, it turns the area around it in difficult terrains. It's like literally melting chocolate, which is kind of funny. I wish its attacks were more interesting. It just kind of like bashes people with its like chocolate-covered pretzel rod. It can kind of shoot its chocolate everywhere and restrain you, which is pretty nice. I love the variant that I would absolutely include, and probably should have been included as the stat block itself, which can kind of mesmerize people or charm into having them walk up and just eat pieces of chocolate, which I believe it causes exhaustion if they fail their constitution save, which just kind of adds a unique effect to this hilarious golem, which I really like the artwork here. The artwork on all the creatures is pretty fantastic and helps sell it. Freya, again, the Celestials don't do much for me because I think it's, you know, maybe seeing one would have been fine. I would have liked to see more of the chocolate golem thing, more of the funny, like, Valentine's tropes versus like a mythical love creatures necessarily. In this case, Freya's like a CR24. She's got a chariot of cats. I think the artwork is actually really funny because it just looks like just a person with like house cats. You don't get that sense of scale at all from this picture. She's supposed to be a huge giant with these large cats that pull her chariot. She's got ridiculous abilities that can just melt people's faces with her tears, and this lash which just like instantly kills people. Just a super high level entity that probably not actually going to fight. The Lavender RHINO, I was very confused about this. I had no idea what this was in reference to. Thankfully, it's actually mentioned what this is reference to, which is apparently a symbol used in the 70s to promote the visibility of the LGBT community in Boston. That is a hell of a deep dive reference, and there is a link included here. You can read about it. I actually did skim over it and thought, okay, it was used as like a parade float, and that's why it's, I guess, a plant creature, because it was probably made out of like, you know, paper mache type material. I got to imagine there was more relevant references and more interesting creature that could have been used specifically as like the LGBT love creature, like at the very least like a rainbow elemental. Felt like that should have been the go-to option. It's just not a very interesting stat block, so this one kind of fell flat for me, but I did learn something today, so there you go. Nymeris, again, the Fae Celestials don't really do much for me. These legendary, like, you are of the, you know, in this case, it's like the vengeful, based on like either unrequited love or jealous love or betrayed love or something. This wolf-like creature appears or is summoned. It's got a kind of cool stat block. You know, CR12, legendary actions, mythic actions, which is interesting. It can, like, if it dies, it kind of respawns and gets new traits if you want to make it even harder. I love the reaction that it can blink out of existence and just reappear somebody else. Just, that's an easy tool for DMs to employ. So even though I'm not necessarily sold on the theme of some of these creatures, I still think the stat blocks are really interesting and fun. Queen Bee I do like, because the fact that honey can be used as a sweetener and is, you know, kind of associated with like gifts of love. Okay, that kind of works for me, but mainly I just like this stat block that she can throw globs of honey, she can summon bees, and also exude pheromones to, control, but in this, control her own drones, but in this case, to do it on players. Instead, you basically roll a d4 if you fail, what does it say? Wisdom save. And different things happen. So you're either, you have to protect, the queen, or you become frightened, or you have to attack the nearest person. It just has some kind of effect right then and there. So really fun stat block. And this is a great example of a CR7 creature that's a boss creature and has its own legendary actions, even though it's not like a top tier, like, crazy powerful thing. But I think that's a really cool standout feature. And it's got, the pheromones it can only do one time for a legendary action. It costs all 3, but I think that's a really cool effect. So I like that creature. Sappho Angel, just kind of a generic, like, we just want to make an angel of love. Not very interesting. Sovereign, okay, you definitely want to do like Cupid as a creature, and I think that's fine. This is probably the one like Fey Celestial creature I would want in this supplement, is the one that shoots the arrows. In this case, the arrows all do different things, which is, again, really cool. I like when creatures have that, like, the Beholder thing, basically, where you either choose your effect or you get to roll the effect, and it's got all these different things you can do because it adds this fun unpredictability for both DMs and players for when facing that creature. So it's got a lot of neat abilities. It's got a really pain-in-the-ass reaction where when you take damage, he can gain resistance to the damage, turn invisible, and teleport up to 60 feet as soon as he takes any kind of damage. What a fucking nightmare to fight, and a hilarious tool for DMs to employ. We just like zips around the battlefield as soon as he's attacked. So that really requires the players to think in a completely different, using different tactics. So really neat idea for a creature. Only CR 13 too, only, he says, even though that's pretty powerful for most parties. So that would be the one Fey creature that I'm a thumbs up on and I enjoy. Wine Elemental, again, I love the idea of literally taking the classic tropes of, the date or the Valentine's Day gift or something and turning that into a creature. And I like the fact that the bottle is actually integrated into the stat block. So it can actually use a bonus action to emerge into its bottle, kind of like the turtle in his shell, and gain increased armor class. And if it's destroyed, its bottle explodes and it does more damage to everybody around it, and then it's got to find like a new bottle. And it's got, fun adventure hooks. I'm kind of skipping over these adventure hooks. If you've watched, hopefully you've watched the other holiday review videos, but these adventure hooks are really fun. They're not just like one sentence things. They're little paragraphs of, how do you come across this creature? And a lot of them are very different in a good way. Like it'll be like, hey, this creature wants to give you a quest, or this person tells you to hunt down this creature, or you find this creature, injured in a forest somewhere. They're not all just variations of the same thing. They do give you very different ideas and situations with which to encounter these creatures, which is a lot of fun. In this case, the Wine Elemental, just in the middle of a tavern, these things start popping out and these Wine Elementals start emerging, and you just turn a tavern, scene into a combat encounter. Or you could purchase one from a merchant because she's got like these, certain wine bottles like under lock and they're like chained up, kind of like the classic, like, Necronomicon. You see like books that are kind of lashed, and chained up with like iron chains. Or you'll be hired by somebody to go and, hey, go bring me, I want some delicious wine. And there's, hey, okay, go into there's a magical vineyard that are full of these wine elementals. You can turn into like a little bit of a dungeon crawl type thing. Just neat ideas that are far more than just the, simple like one sentence bullet points. So that's something I've come to appreciate. Let's go over my pros and cons for the 10 Hazards of Loved. Pro, loved the monsters that avoid seduction tropes. That was a huge plus for me because I was worried we would run into because there's a lot of those kind of creatures already. Notably the succubus/incubus that involve, charming creatures and, putting them under kind of a mind control type daze. And yes, that would be the easy thing to do, would be to create a bunch of creatures that do that. And from what I can tell, none of these creatures do that. And yet most of them still fit the love theme pretty well. So I did think that was a huge pro. Pro, fun stat blocks with interesting abilities and plenty of legendary action. So even creatures that I thought didn't necessarily fit the theme as well for me, they still had really fun stat blocks. These are really creative creatures that use their different traits and abilities in interesting ways. And whether they're debilitating traits like the chocolate golem melting if it's exposed to fire, or the wine elemental with its bottle, or the sovereign with its magic bow that does different effects. There's a lot of really cool things to see here, and a lot of use of legendary actions on like half the creatures, which I think is a huge pro as well. And pro, I forgot to show this, but I've got a tab. Printable postcards that showcase the lovely creature art. So even though I was kind of down on the art for the midsummer, the summer themed creature one, I'm back up on this one. I like all the art. It fits the theme very, very well. I like these postcards. We could probably do without the, lame attempt at advertising here. I would have preferred if these just were funny postcards you could give to your players as handouts if you were meeting, these creatures and wanted to kind of continue on with the joke. I think that'd be really fun, but I still like that these are separate, image files that you can download. My con is I feel like there's just an over-reliance on celestial and fey creatures, which is pretty much all the creatures I didn't like. Were all the fey and celestial creatures. I wish, we can do the Cupid one. The Sovereign was fine, but Nymeris, the Wolf, the Celestial Magpie, Freya, none of those really worked for me. I would have liked to see more ideas of, the Valentine's Day concept. So maybe something to do with roses. I was shocked we didn't see anything to do with roses, some kind of plant rose creature. Something to do with like sappy love songs would have been a thing. Maybe like the concept of like the crowded restaurant. I don't know how you convey that into a creature, but there's got to be a way of doing that somehow. I was thinking, I wrote down in my notes like some kind of romance or a rom-com, a romance novel, and I thought, what about like a Fabio type creature that had like the long flowing hair, the half-open shirt? I don't know how you turn that into a creature. And again, you want to still avoid the seduction trope, but still make it a funny, to where people can enjoy the humor of going hard with the tropes. So those are just kind of the spitballing ideas that I had. Those are kind of the things I would like to see more of if they were more humorous, but still having fun stat blocks, rather than necessarily going for, okay, this is the goddess of love from this, pantheon, and we're going to introduce this creature. That's my ideas anyway. Final verdict: from chocolate golems to wine elementals, Hazards of Love includes creative creatures with interesting stat blocks that successfully reach beyond seduction and succubi. Thank you everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Thank you.